The morning the horse arrived, the Trojans thought the war was over. They walked down to the beach and found the Greek ships gone, the camp abandoned, the fires cold. 10 years of siege, 10 years of watching Greek soldiers dig in on the plain below the walls, 10 years of battles and truces, and burning and grief. And now the plain was empty. The Greeks had left in the night. Except for the horse, it stood on the beach where the ships had been, enormous, built from the timber of the dismantled Greek camp, tall enough that a man standing at its shoulder would not reach the top. Around its legs lay offerings, garlands and ribbons and the scraps of a hasty ceremony. A group of Trojans stood in a circle around it and argued about what it meant. Some said burn it, some said drag it into the sea. A priest named Laocoon hurled a spear at its flank and said, "Trust nothing the Greeks leave behind." He was ignored. A Trojan woman named Cassandra, who had been cursed by Apollo with the gift of true prophecy and the punishment that no one would ever believe her, said the horse would destroy the city. She was ignored too. They dragged it inside the walls. That decision had been 9 years in the making, though the Trojans did not know it. The war had begun with a wedding and a theft. The goddess Eris, Discord, the one deity no one wanted at a celebration, had not been invited to the wedding of the sea nymph Thetis. She arrived anyway and rolled a golden apple into the middle of the feast, inscribed with 3 words, "For the most beautiful." 3 goddesses reached for it simultaneously. Hera, queen of the gods. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. Aphrodite, goddess of love. Zeus, with the particular cowardice of those who hold absolute power, refused to judge between them himself. He delegated the decision to a mortal, a young man from Troy named Paris, son of King Priam, who was minding his own business on the slopes of Mount Ida when 3 goddesses descended on him and demanded he choose between them. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera offered power, kingdoms, dominion, the ability to rule other men. Athena offered wisdom and skill in battle. Aphrodite offered the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. The most beautiful woman in the world was Helen, wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. Paris sailed to Sparta, was welcomed as a guest, and left with Helen. Whether she went willingly or was taken by force is a question that Homer deliberately leaves open, which is part of why the story has never grown old. What is not open is what happened next. Menelaus called on his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, the most powerful man in Greece. Agamemnon assembled a coalition of every kingdom in the Greek world. Achilles from Thessaly, Odysseus from Ithaca, Ajax from Salamis, Diomedes from Argos, a fleet of 1,000 ships, and they crossed the Aegean Sea and landed on the plain below the walls of Troy. The walls did not fall. For 9 years, they did not fall. Troy was a city that had been built to be unconquerable. Its walls were said to have been built by Apollo and Poseidon themselves, in the time before the current king, when the gods still walked among men and sometimes picked up stone. Whether or not you believe that, the walls that stood above the plain were extraordinary. Massive limestone blocks fitted without mortar, rising to a height that made assault from below suicidal. Towers at intervals along the circuit gave archers clear lines of fire across the approaches. The city sat on high ground, with the steep slope of the citadel providing natural defense on 3 sides. Below those walls, the greatest heroes of the Greek world died. Achilles was the best of them. He was the son of the sea nymph Thetis and the mortal king Peleus, the hero of the wedding that had started everything. And he had been dipped in the river Styx as an infant, his mother holding him by the heel, making him invulnerable everywhere, except the one spot where her fingers had gripped him. He had been given a choice before the war, a long life in obscurity or a short life in eternal glory. He had chosen glory. He killed the Trojan prince Hector, the greatest of Troy's defenders, the man who held the city together when the walls themselves could not, in single combat outside the gates, dragging his body 3 times around the walls behind his chariot while Hector's parents watched from above. Then Paris, guided by Apollo, put put an arrow through Achilles' heel. The greatest warrior of the age died from a wound to the one place he could be wounded. After Achilles, after Hector, after 9 years of siege, neither side was winning. The Greeks could not breach the walls. The Trojans could not drive the Greeks back to their ships. The war had become something neither side had planned for, a slow grind that was killing the best men of both worlds while the walls stood and the years passed. It was Odysseus who ended it. Odysseus was not the greatest warrior. He was the cleverest man. He proposed the horse. The Greeks built it from the timber of their own dismantled ships and camp, a monument that would look like a religious offering, a gift to the gods to ensure safe passage home. Inside the hollow body, they sealed a small force of their best fighters. Odysseus himself went in. Then the rest of the Greek army boarded their ships, sailed around the headland, and waited out of sight. In the morning, the Trojans found an empty beach and an enormous wooden horse and a single Greek soldier named Sinon, who had been left behind. Sinon told them the horse was a sacred offering to Athena, too large to be moved by the Greeks because they wanted the Trojans to keep it. He said that if the Trojans brought it inside their walls, Troy would be protected forever. If they destroyed it, the gods would be offended and Troy would fall. The Trojans believed him. That night, while Troy celebrated the end of the war with wine and fire and the relief of a city that had survived 10 years of siege and believed it had won, while the guards relaxed and the streets filled with people who had not felt safe in a decade, the Greek soldiers inside the horse descended through a trapdoor in the dark and moved through the city. They opened the gates. The ships sailed back across the bay in the darkness. The army that had spent 10 years failing to breach the walls walked through the open gate. What followed, the poets recorded with the particular unflinching attention that ancient literature brought to disaster. The city burned. Priam, the old king who had watched his greatest son die in the dust before the gates, was killed at the altar where he had fled for sanctuary. The Trojan women were divided among the Greek commanders as slaves. Cassandra, who had been right about everything and believed by no one, was taken by Agamemnon. She tried to warn him about what awaited him at home. He did not listen. The fire burned for days. The walls that Apollo and Poseidon had built, that 10 years and 1,000 ships had not been able to breach, stood around a city that was already ash. The myth says this. The ground says something else, and something very similar. At Hisarlik, a mound on the northwestern coast of Turkey, archaeologists have excavated 9 layers of ancient settlement built on top of each other over thousands of years. The layer dated to approximately 1180 BC, the precise time frame that ancient Greek historians calculated for the end of the Trojan War, shows evidence of violent destruction. Arrowheads embedded in the walls, unburied bodies in the streets, buildings burned from within, storage jars sunk into the floors, the kind of emergency food storage that a population under siege would make. The city was large, larger than early excavations suggested, a lower city extending well beyond the citadel, with defensive ditches and dense habitation, a settlement of tens of thousands of people controlling the entrance to the Dardanelles, and wealthy from centuries of taxing the ships that passed through. Hittite diplomatic tablets from the same period mention a city called Wilusa in northwestern Anatolia. Almost certainly, Ilios, Homer's name for Troy, and reference conflicts with the kingdom of Ahhiyawa, a name linguists connect to Homer's Achaeans, the Greeks. The broad outline of Homer's world, Greek kingdoms projecting military power into the coast of Turkey in the late Bronze Age, is not invention. It is what the clay tablets describe. The wooden horse may have been literal, may have been a siege engine, a battering ram, or a wheeled tower that later tradition transformed into a story. May have been a symbol, the Greeks as raiders and tricksters, remembered in the image of the thing that looked like an offering and was actually a weapon. History rarely preserves the mechanism of its own disasters cleanly. What it does preserve, sometimes, is the result. The walls of Troy are still there, in a field in Turkey, open to visitors. You can stand on the limestone blocks that once formed the circuit of the citadel and look out across the plain toward the sea. The plain is flat and quiet. The strait gleams in the distance. Somewhere in that ground are the arrowheads. Somewhere in those walls is the fire. The city fell 3,000 years ago. The walls are still standing. If this story stayed with you, watch our video on the fall of Jerusalem, 70 AD. Another city behind impossible walls. Another siege that lasted years. And another night when the gates finally opened.